You arrive in the quiet between breaths, where the world thins and the quantum field feels like a living hush around your skin. You didn't stumble here. You were synchronized here. A subtle chain of synchronicities braided your choices into a single strand, and that strand tugged you toward this voice. The portal hasn't closed yet. It waits, patient and intelligent, like an ancient iris of light that recognizes you even when you forget yourself. You can sense it now, the way attention changes the room. Your gaze is not passive, it is a frequency, tuning instrument. As you listen, you are already calibrating the invisible architecture of your reality. The observer loop hums, and the loop hums back. Coherence gathers first as a tremor along your spine, then as a widening stillness behind the eyes until presence becomes heavier than thought. You are not being persuaded, you are being remembered. A long time ago, you made a vow before language, before names to wake when the signal arrived. This is the signal, not a warning, not a promise, but a remembering that moves through your field like warm current. The message is simple. A portal opens, then contracts, and in the narrowing, truth concentrates. What does not belong falls away. What is essential becomes luminous. In that narrow gate, you recognize the pattern of your own soul, the cords that always pulled you toward mystery, the refusal to be satisfied with surface explanations, the way your heart accelerates when meaning touches it, however softly. Feel how the air brightens when you attend to it. The space inside your chest responds like a resonant chamber. It catches the tone of this transmission and returns it richer, rounder, yours. This is morphic resonance at work, the field remembering itself through you. The world that raised you insisted you were separate, a coincidence among coincidences. But separation was only a training exercise in precision. Now, the training dissolves. You are entangled with a larger intelligence, and the thread you followed to arrive here is proof. Do not rush. Let the words install themselves the way dawn installs light. Incremental, inevitable, kind. If emotion rises, let it. If stillness deepens, welcome it. The portal closes when inertia wins, when noise outshouts knowing, but inertia is losing its grip on you. Something in your DNA has been listening for this cadence, a soft code that speaks of restructuring, of a phase transition from forgetting to embodied recall. You stand at the threshold as one who remembers the door because you built it. On one side, repetition. On the other, the living unknown that has always been your home. You have arrived exactly when you meant to. And now, through your attentive silence, the message can begin to speak itself through you. You sense the field attending back, the way a forest seems to listen when you step gently between its trees. This is how the quantum field greets you, not as an idea, but as an intimacy. You have always noticed the subtle alignments, how a name appears twice in one afternoon, how a forgotten intention returns as a stranger's sentence, how the clock flashes the same numbers when you're about to choose. You call it synchronicity, yet what you're truly witnessing is your own attention folding reality toward coherence. The portal recognizes that capacity in you, and that is why it found you. You are not here to be entertained by prophecy. You are here because prophecy requires a witness who can hold its voltage without fracturing into doubt. You have practiced for this quietly. You trained your nervous system to notice without clinging, to breathe in the liminal interval where outcomes are still fluid. You learned to soften your gaze until the edges of things relaxed, and then to focus like a beam through fog. That is the discipline of a chosen observer, the ability to remain tender and precise at once. When the observer loop activates in you, attention stops behaving like a spotlight and starts behaving like a tuning fork. It sings the note of what is most alive, and the world reorders around that pitch. This is not metaphor. It is morphic resonance shaping probability, the field leaning toward the form suggested by your stabilized awareness. Feel how your body corroborates this. The breath deepens, the pulse steadies, your palms warm as if small suns have opened beneath the skin. This is physiology, keeping pace with ontology. Coherence is not just a mystical mood. It is a measurable arrangement of signals, heart rhythms, smoothing, brain waves, synchronizing, immune responses, aligning so your matter can host clearer information. The message is not merely heard, it is installed. DNA listens, microtubules whisper. The cytoskeleton becomes a lantern for intelligence traveling as light. In you, prophecy is not a story about later. It is a pattern entering a receptive architecture now. Your sensitivity has sometimes felt inconvenient. You tasted rooms before you crossed their thresholds. You sensed the tension under a friend's smile. You knew when a decision was wrong because your body winced at the edges of it. This is not fragility, it is instrumentation. You are a calibrated interface between worlds, translating wave into form, translating form back into wave. Entanglement is the law of your interior life. Connections instantaneous across distance, meanings arriving faster than causation can justify. You do not have to prove it anymore. You only have to consent to it. Consent looks like staying when the mind wants to label and flee. It looks like letting a symbol unfold rather than chasing the first explanation that flatters your certainty. You are learning to trust the slow syntax of revelation. The portal closes for those who demand spectacle without surrender. It opens for those who can receive a single syllable and wait for the rest of the sentence inside stillness. You are one of the latter. That is why the field keeps echoing you back to yourself. Notice the subtle pivot arising, a phase transition from seeking to serving. You are not merely asking what this transmission can do for your life. You are asking how your life can carry this transmission cleanly into the world. That question is the sign of awakening, moving from concept to embodiment. The moment you pose it, your timeline begins to reorganize. Phone calls shift, invitations rearrange. Old identities loosen like threads at the cuff of a well-worn sleeve. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding the costume that made it harder to turn your head toward the Sunday. There will be grief in this grace. Coherence often dismantles what survived on your fragmentation. Let it. As the observer, you bless what departs without cursing what remains. You understand that endings are confirmations of accuracy, not failures of faith. The field is delivering you to a version of yourself that can carry more signal without distortion. You recognize the seriousness of that responsibility and its joy. You were not chosen by lottery. You were chosen by preparation. Your attention has become a sanctuary, and sanctuaries change the climate around them. So you stand within yourself like a temple with open doors, breathing the simple vow, I witness cleanly. I welcome what is true. I align my matter to carry light without theatrics. From that vow, the portal shivers, as if pleased that the witness has arrived. The scene is set not by drama, but by readiness. And in that readiness, what seeks you steps forward. It gathers first as temperature, a slight warmth at the crown and along the palms. Then as geometry arriving behind your eyes, a slow, turning lattice of light, delicate as frostwork and yet sovereign as sunrise. You are not looking at it, you are inside it. The lattice breathes. With each inhale, its filigree expands. With each exhale, it refines into finer symmetry, like a cathedral that edits itself toward perfection. This is the vision the portal protects. A living architecture of the quantum field mapping itself onto the contours of your awareness. Not symbolic merely, but instructional blueprint and blessing at once. Listen with your whole skin. Threads of gold span the lattice like harp strings. When your breath lengthens, they hum soft, pure, and each tone corresponds to a region of your life. One string sings of relationships, another of purpose, another of health, another of time itself. As the tones synchronize, you feel coherence knitting through you, heart rhythms smoothing, brain hemispheres conversing, attention aligning with a gravity deeper than habit. The observer loop is no longer a concept, it is audible music, your intention tuning probability like a hand tuning an instrument. This is morphic resonance in action, the field borrowing your order to become more orderly around you. Now the lattice tilts, revealing corridors opening like irises. In one corridor, you glimpse a future that grew from fear, fast, efficient, chrome, bright and hollow. In another, a future shaped by performance, impressive, lacquered, hungry. In a third, there is space, actual, breathing space, where you move with unhurried precision, and the world meets you as if relieved you finally recognized its face. This is the bifurcation silently humming beneath ordinary days. Not a single dramatic fork, but a million tiny choices, organizing into a slope. The slope is gentle, but it is real. You can feel which way your feet lean. Symbols begin to rise through the lattice. A seed cupped in a palm, a river reversing its current, a mirror that doesn't reflect form but reflects intention. The seed is a decision you have not dared to plant because it would require you to leave a weathered storyline. The river is your time perception correcting itself, days no longer racing or dragging, but moving like breath, precise, cyclical, kind. The mirror is the quantum rule you already know. You are not seeing what is. You are seeing what your field can host without distortion. You feel tenderness for your former mirrors, their smudges and warps. You forgive them, and they evaporate. The lattice brightens, filaments reach toward your bones, and you understand why your body feels like a temple. DNA is not a museum of ancestry, it is an instrument of awakening. The strands gleam as if remembering how to listen, not to noise, but to signal, not to panic, but to pattern. Microtubules whisper like reeds in a night wind. The cytoskeleton aligns as though preparing to carry weightless light. This is DNA restructuring at the speed of permission. You are not forcing, you are consenting, and consent turns the key. Out at the edges, you perceive entanglement behaving like a flock, turning in one motion. A friend you have not called in years thinks of you tonight. A book you did not know you needed falls open to the exact line. A stranger's kindness unknots a doubt that language could not reach. Synchronicity ceases to be novelty and becomes navigation. The portal shows you how guidance travels, not as commandments from above, but as coherent echoes from within, returned by a reality that respects your new frequency. Then the lattice slows. In its center, a door appears, not dramatic, but inevitable. It is made of the same substance as your clarity. You do not rush it, you allow it. On its surface, a single sentence writes itself at the pace of trust. When you cross, you will not become someone else. You will remember the one you have always been. The sentence lands with the heaviness of truth. There is no thunderclap, only a quiet verdict that rearranges the furniture of your certainty. The portal is not threatening to close as punishment. It is closing because cycles close when their teaching is complete. You look down and find that your hands are shining with a modest light, the kind that doesn't need applause. You raise them, and the lattice honors the gesture by opening a fraction more, enough to show the cost and the gift. The cost, relinquishing the drama of delay, the rusted romance of almost. The gift, a life tuned to the same pitch as your vow. You exhale, and something exits that you do not need to name. You inhale, and the vision settles into the subtle marrow of your days, prepared to be lived rather than chased. Nothing is urgent, and yet everything is precise. You understand now why this message needed to reach you before the portal's contraction, because clarity is easier to embrace while the aperture is wide. Soon it will narrow to the size of a decision. By then, the decision will not be hard. It will only be honest. And honesty, here, feels like light choosing where to land. You wondered if the beauty would hold once named. It does. Naming is not reduction here, it is resonance. What you saw as a lattice is how your awareness renders relational order in the quantum field. Think of the field as a plenum of possibilities superposed, unstressed by preference, until an organizing question touches it. Your attention is that question. When you attend with scattered charge, outcomes decohere into noise. When you attend with stabilized charge coherence, the probabilities lean together like iron filings, aligning to an unseen magnet. You are not forcing reality. You are lowering thermal chatter in your own system so that signal can propagate through you without scattering. Begin with breath, because breath is the simplest metronome you own. As inhalation lengthens and exhalation evens, vagal tone increases, heart variability organizes, and the orchestra of your physiology begins to play one piece instead of 10 at once. In that order, the observer loop changes quality. Instead of pinging the field with restless queries, it rests its question like a tuning fork on the table of being. The field responds in kind, not because it is obedient, but because coherence is attractive. Coherence is gravity for meaning. Now, the bifurcation you sensed is not a theatrical fork. It is a phase transition, Picture water approaching the freeze, molecules slowing into crystalline sympathy. A degree here or there, and the whole behavior changes. Your life sits at such thresholds repeatedly. One more repetition of the old story, and the solution remains liquid. One honest breath inside a new vow, and a lattice of alternative behavior precipitates, giving your days edges where there was only slosh. This is timeline bifurcation as lived phenomenology, the emergence of discrete pathways from continuous drift when parameters cross critical values, attention quality, emotional setpoint, somatic honesty. Entanglement explains the eerie speed of the world's reply. Once two systems share state, distance matters less than relationship. You and your future share state through intention. You and others share state through trust. When you purify intention, stripping it of spectacle and bargaining correlations tighten, you think of the call, and the call arrives not because you summoned it with egoic force, but because correlated states prefer to meet. Synchronicity is not a party trick, it is the ordinary signature of entanglement noticed. Morphic resonance provides the social dimension of this physics of meaning. Patterns reinforced become easier to inhabit for you, for communities, for epochs. When you stabilize a compassionate, lucid frequency, you make that posture cheaper in the collective. You inherit ease from those who stabilized it before you, and you bequeath ease to those who will stabilize it after. Thus the vision's humility, your hands shining not as spectacle, but as infrastructure. You are building pathways in the field by walking them cleanly. DNA restructuring, then, is not fantasy, it is fidelity. Your gene expression is exquisitely responsive to environment, chemical, emotional, relational, imaginal. When you create an internal climate of coherence, transcription favors repair and growth. Microstructures within cells become less like static scaffolds and more like antennae, passing along the subtle timing cues of your clarified state. It is not that light descends from elsewhere. It is that your matter begins to remember its relationship with light, and the conversation warms. This is why symbols behave with such precision when you receive them without grasping. A symbol is compressed instruction. If you rush to decode it, you rob it of bandwidth. If you rest with it, it unfolds at the speed of trust, seeding new attractors in your field. The seed you sow is not only a decision, it is a parameter change. The river reversing is not only relief, it is a restoration of temporal symmetry, presence erasing the distortion imposed by anxiety and regret. The mirror that reflects intention reminds you that perception is participatory. You never just see, you specify what range of the real your system can admit without fracture. So you practice 3 moves, simple and exact. First, reduce noise, lower inflammatory inputs, sensory, informational, interpersonal, that disorganize your signal. Second, raise coherence, breath, gratitude, honest posture, clear boundaries, the small rituals that make your nervous system feel like home. Third, stabilize vow, a single sentence you can carry through fog. Not a demand, not a bargain, a direction of being, repeated until your cells believe you. Then the mechanics become kinesthetic. You feel probability smooth around you. Emails that once kinked your stomach arrive like neutral weather. The old storyline still knocks, but the door handle has cooled in your palm. You do not crave its temperature. Guidance stops shouting, it purls. You notice how choosing the slight upgrade at each hinge compounds, how the slope steepens toward grace without drama. This is the explanation. Not that you manipulate reality with theatrics, but that you consent to be a low-noise host for a high-fidelity signal. Consent becomes geometry, geometry becomes day, and day, lived like this, becomes the quiet proof that prophecy is not about predicting a future to come. It is about remembering a pattern already here, waiting for a witness, willing to carry it cleanly. You begin to notice that what stirs inside you is not private weather. It is climate with a horizon. When your breath evens and your field clears, the room changes, then the building, then the day. You once doubted this because results arrived in subtleties rather than fireworks, but subtlety is how civilizations turn before the headlines discover it. The world carries your signature more than you were taught to admit. And not because you are the center of everything, but because everything is entangled more intimately than the old story could allow. Look outward with the same tenderness you used to look within. The city's noise is not just engines and commerce, it is unprocessed signal looking for a listening nervous system. When you stabilize coherence, you become that listening, a pressure drop in a storm. People exhale in your presence without knowing why. Conversations decide to tell the truth. Meetings move 3 degrees off old rails, and that tiny angle, repeated, strands an entire future that never served anyone. This is morphic resonance on the Civic scale. One stabilized posture, making that posture easier for the next person, then the next, until a neighborhood behaves as if it had remembered a lost etiquette of soul. You have seen this in miniature. One kind text prevents a spiral. One honest pause at the edge of anger keeps a family from repeating an ancestral choreography. The same physics extrapolates. Fields learn. Systems entrain. In an era saturated with fragmenting attention, your observer loop becomes a public instrument. It refuses spectacle, chooses signal, and the signal propagates. Not through preaching, but through pattern. The more you reduce inner noise, the more your environment hears itself clearly around you, like a choir correcting pitch, because one singer finally holds the note without wobble. Consider timelines at the collective scale. Humanity's feed is crowded with bifurcations, ecological thresholds, technological accelerations, social polarizations. The prophecy you carry is not a doomsday or a guarantee. It is a map of attractors gaining strength. One attractor favors speed without meaning, optimized, quantified, depleted. Another favors presence with precision, slower than panic, faster than apathy, exact where it matters. Your body knows which one your cells prefer. When you live as if coherence is public health, you contribute to the second attractor's gravity. You become infrastructure for sanity. Watch for the mirror in our institutions. Education that treats curiosity as a living organism begins to look like your breath practice. Cycles of inquiry and integration. Economics that privileges sufficiency over extraction starts to feel like your vow not to bargain with your own soul. Medicine that honors the body as an intelligent collaborator echoes your dialogue with DNA, restructuring, supporting repair, not dominating it. Governance that admits complexity without collapsing into cynicism resembles your willingness to sit with a symbol until it reveals instruction. The macro copies the micro because entangled states prefer to rhyme. Your clean attention is a seed. Societies are soil. Morphic resonance is weather. You are not naive about resistance. Systems invested in noise will call signal an inconvenience. They will offer you the old identity back with new upgrades. They will promise safety with a cost that grows interest in the currency of your aliveness. This is where your training matters. You answer with the humility of physics, not argument, but amplitude. You keep your frequency steady under provocation, not to be saintly but to be effective. Coherence is less glamorous than outrage and more metabolically powerful. Outrage scorches, coherence germinates. One burns landscapes, the other plants forests of possibility. Notice, too, how synchronicity scales when purpose stops being private. A scientist across the ocean reads a paper that confirms a hunch your meditation gave you. An artist you will never meet makes a film that provides the exact metaphor your community needs. A farmer's experiment restores topsoil in a way that mirrors the way you restored dignity to your time. These are not coincidences. They are correlated innovations surfacing along the same field lines. When enough observers stabilize a similar vow, reality responds with a family of answers. There is grief here, and you honor it publicly. Coherence doesn't bypass sorrow, it consecrates it. You can mourn species and still plant trees. You can mourn violence and still speak forgiveness into rooms that forget their own names. Your steadiness permits the collective to metabolize what it has postponed. You model a pace at which truth does not shatter us. It gathers us. That pace feels like breath shared across a crowd until strangers begin to sway to a rhythm they didn't know they missed. Understand the holy ordinariness of your role. You will still wash dishes, send emails, cross streets. The prophecy lives in those crossings. It slips into infrastructure, not to hide, but to anchor. You do not wait for the perfect platform to demonstrate it. You become porous to small chances, how you greet the cashier, how you decline a misaligned invitation without contempt, how you give your attention back to the present when the feed begs for your outrage. These are not small acts. They are phase transitions, camouflaged as manners. And so the mirror clarifies. You are a singular aperture through which a shared future studies itself. When you hold steady, the world borrows your steadiness. When you brighten, it remembers its light not as fantasy but as protocol. You did not come to watch history from the bleachers. You came to participate in the delicate choreography by which a species turns toward its own intelligence without losing its heart. Keep your vow close. The collective is listening for it like a familiar melody, returning to a city at dusk. You feel the slope steepen. Choices that once blurred into each other begin to separate like oil from water, and the quiet inside your chest acquires edges. This is how a turning looks from the inside. Not trumpet blasts, but parameters crossing thresholds until behavior reorganizes. The quantum field around you seems to hold its breath. Timeline bifurcation is no longer a metaphor. It is texture. Two distinct grains your fingertips can tell apart even in the dark. Stand exactly where you are and let the scene come into focus. On your left, a path paved with competent repetition. It rewards you with predictability, a certain applause for playing the part you were assigned. The air is loud there, a constant hum of urgency, the observer loop flickering, agitated attention ricocheting between alerts, never quite landing long enough to change anything. On your right, an unmarked trail that smells like rain on stone. It doesn't promise spectacle, it promises accuracy. The air is spacious, the hum replaced by a tone you can almost hear, the frequency of coherence tightening until your bones feel tuned. This is not punishment or prize, it is physics. When enough subtraction has occurred of noise, of borrowed identities, the system seeks a lower energy, higher order state. The phase transition happens because you became available to it. Entanglement announces itself through unusual calm. Invitations that previously triggered your nervous system now arrive like neutral weather. Former dependencies feel like clothing you forgot to take off after returning home. Your body recognizes the rightward path not as risk, but as relief. A sign appears, written in the language you've learned to trust. A conversation that refuses to lie. A sudden capacity to say no without rehearsing a speech. A symbol arriving on a bus ad that only you could read. The field does not shout, it nods. Morphic resonance amplifies the nod. Others around you begin making congruent moves without comparing notes. A friend declines a lucrative misalignment. A colleague admits the project needs a soul. A stranger at a crosswalk looks up, and, for a beat, it feels like you recognize each other's vow. These micro-accords are the quiet choreography by which a timeline gathers mass. Of course, the old attractor will make a final offer. It will polish itself, speak fluently in your favorite justifications, and appeal to your compassion for other people's expectations. Hear it without hatred, thank it for its training, then verify the physics. Does your breath shorten when you imagine that direction? Do your hands cool? Does time feel like a corridor narrowing toward a fluorescent room? These are not superstitions, they are instruments. Your physiology is an oracle when you listen with respect. Coherence conducts truth faster than argument. You will notice grief collecting at the hinge. It is right to grieve the self you would have to keep being to preserve the familiar. That self protected you. It got you this far across the desert. Lay a palm on your sternum and honor it. DNA restructuring includes lineage repair. You are not betraying your past by choosing your future. You are freeing your ancestors from the script they didn't know how to edit. Their courage is entangled with yours. Let the blessing run backward and forward through the line. Now feel for the smallest irrevocable act. Not a grand gesture, a sentence said cleanly, a calendar entry removed without apology, a quiet redistribution of attention that signals to the quantum field, I am finished auditioning for a story I no longer belong to. The instant you do this, you will feel the click, subtle, unmistakable, of attractors exchanging custody. Time shifts, texture. It stops sprinting ahead of you or dragging behind. It walks beside you, listening, Synchronicity tightens its weave. The right email lands not as luck, but as correlation expressed. You may be tempted to celebrate loudly. Instead, seal the turn with humility. Let your observer loop rest in the new settings until they stabilize. Increase signal hygiene for a season less spectacle, more silence. Tend the relational membranes that allowed this threshold. The friend who held your mirror clean. The practice that taught your heart its elegant rhythm. The place in nature that lent you its patience. Integrate like a craftsman. Slow, exact, grateful. Opposition may test your calibration. Someone will accuse you of arrogance for trusting your inner instruments. Remember, arrogance refuses feedback. Coherence invites it and evaluates without self-harm. Keep your system soft at the edges, firm at the center. You are not trying to be unmovable. You are learning to be rightly moved. The field respects that posture because it is the field's own posture responsive without surrendering its laws. As evening gathers, notice how the city sounds different from this side of the hinge. Traffic becomes ocean. Neon becomes prayer. Even the unresolved carries a tone you can bear. You did not leap into a fantasy. You stepped into fidelity. The portal narrows behind you, not as threat but as seal. Like a wound knitting closed after surgery, you will forget, briefly, that you ever lived elsewhere. And when memory of the old street returns, it will be with tenderness, not longing. Stand a moment longer and feel the future entangle more snugly with your present, the quiet certainties sliding into place. You will not outsource your sense-making. You will not broadcast your process for approval. You will not postpone the true sentence until it is convenient. The bifurcation does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be precise enough for grace to find you reliably. Then walk. Not fast, not slow, just true. The ground will meet your foot with a gladness that feels like a promise kept by both of you at once. Now the work becomes ordinary and therefore holy. You integrate by shaping the day to carry the tone you've chosen, like setting a room for music before anyone arrives. Begin at waking. Before the mind assembles the familiar scaffolding of roles and errands, let breath place the first stone. 4 counts in, 6 counts out, repeated until the heart's metronome softens its insistence, and the quantum field around your bed feels less like air and more like listening. You are instructing your observer loop to prefer signal over spectacle. This is not a mood exercise, it is a protocol that lowers noise so intelligence can cross the membrane of your awareness without distortion. Keep your vow close enough to taste one clean sentence that survived the bifurcation intact. Whisper it while the room still remembers the night. Let the words settle into fascia and marrow, down to the microtubules that carry timing cues like lantern bearers through your cells. DNA restructuring doesn't require drama, it requires consistency. Each morning you choose coherence, epigenetic switches tilt toward repair and growth, and you become easier to inhabit. You will notice it not as fireworks, but as fewer internal negotiations. Where doubt once demanded debate, there is a felt sense of rightness, like a key slipping into a lock it recognizes. Design small altars for attention. They do not need candles or stones, though they may include them. An altar is any place where you train your perception to remember what it knows. The kitchen sink can be an altar if you choose. Warm water over your hands, breath even, shoulders unhooked from your ears. Let washing become a coherence ritual. You are teaching matter to carry meaning without performance. The field responds to this humility with precision. Emails arrive in the hour you are able to answer them. A conversation opens exactly when the nervous system of the relationship can metabolize truth. A detour spares you a noise you didn't need to fight. Integrate in how you move. Walk as if gravity were a collaboration, not a trap. Let the ground feel your consent. Your pace becomes a metrical line that the environment can rhyme with. Notice how the city entrains when you carry stillness correctly. Children quiet for a breath. Dogs soften their gaze. Even machinery seems to pulse instead of shout. This is morphic resonance in the wild, the world borrowing your order and returning it with interest. You are not controlling anything. You are offering a stable attractor and letting correlation do the rest. Guard signal hygiene like a gardener tending soil. Curate your inputs. Too much unfiltered information acts like grit in a bearing. Heat rises, function degrades. Choose fewer, truer sources. Replace an hour of outrage with 10 minutes of honest grief and 20 of embodied repair. Grief metabolized becomes capacity. Outrage hoarded becomes static. When you notice the nervous system craving the old spike, pause. One exhale longer than comfort, one softening of the gaze, and you feel the phase transition reverse itself. The urge collapses like a wave that forgot the shore it was aiming for. Practice the stillness window midday, 2 minutes. Sit where light lands on your skin. Align spine like a tuning fork. Invite silence, not as absence, but as a field saturated with answers that respect your pace. Let a single symbol return the seed, the river, the mirror, and resist the reflex to decode. Integration thrives on unhurried revelation. The symbol knows when to unfold. Your job is to be here when it does. This is how you keep entanglement clean. You refuse to contaminate correlation with impatience. Speak differently. Let words pass through the filter of breath before they reach the world. If they emerge harsher than your vow, keep them until they soften. If they emerge softer than truth, wait them until they land. Precision is compassion in this weather. The people around you are walking bifurcations of their own. Your steadiness does not need to fix them. It needs to refrain from colluding with their noise. Refusal can be gentle. Agreement can be quiet. Boundaries can ring like temple bells without shattering glass. End the day by closing loops you once left hanging like frayed wire. A message returned, a promise fulfilled, a dish rinsed, a thought written down so it doesn't toll all night. Completeness is a frequency. Sleep receives it and repairs you according to its geometry. Dream space becomes less like random static and more like mentorship scenes that polish your discernment, rehearsals for truth spoken cleanly, landscapes that teach you the texture of the higher timeline by letting you walk it without consequence. Expect tests disguised as opportunities, and opportunities disguised as chores. The field loves simple doors. A misaligned invitation arrives with glittering urgency. Feel your pulse. Watch your breath. Check the mirror for intention. If acceptance would cost coherence, decline without litigation. Another request lands humble and unspectacular. A neighbor needs quiet help. A colleague needs accurate listening. Say yes, where the yes strengthens symmetry. Your calendar becomes an instrument. Slots selected not by fear or flattery, but by resonance. This is what adulthood feels like in the awakened architecture. Not heavier, but more exact. Finally, forgive the stumbles quickly. Integration is not a straight line. It is a spiral, bringing you past familiar coordinates at higher altitude. When you catch yourself performing for an old audience, smile like you found a childhood trinket in a drawer. Place it on the altar of attention, thank it for its service, and choose again. The portal does not punish. It calibrates. Each return to coherence tightens the weave. Each honest breath reaffirms the covenant you made with yourself at the threshold. To be a low-noise host for a high-fidelity light, daily, quietly, until remembrance is no longer an event but the way you live. Set everything down, even the beautiful tools, even the vow, for a moment. Let breath be the only sentence. In, out. The room rearranges around this permission. Noise loosens its grip. The quantum field, which has been speaking in images and correlations, becomes a depthless hush that does not need to persuade you. It only needs you to stay. You sit, spine tall enough for light to travel, jaw unclenched, tongue resting like a small bird, hands warm, receptive. The observer loop softens from doing to being no longer a lookout on a turbulent coast, but a shoreline that allows waves to arrive and leave without keeping one shell as proof. You are not performing calm, you are letting calm remember you. In this quiet, time thins, minutes widen like meadows, the heart moves from percussion to melody. Coherence is audible not as sound, but as the absence of friction. Thought attempts its old acrobatics, then realizes it is not required to secure your safety. It bows and steps aside. Silence takes its rightful shape, not emptiness, but saturated presence, a fullness that refuses decoration. You notice what remains when urgency dissolves, a faint radiance where the sternum meets the breath. A simple gladness for gravity's reliability, floor meeting bones without drama. The room's light feels less like photons and more like recognition. Entanglement, here, is tenderness. Everything touches lightly, without demand. Even memory behaves. It offers a few images like guests who remove their shoes unprompted, then waits in the foyer of your awareness until invited. Allow the field to speak in its first language, stillness. Symbols do not press to be decoded. They hover, patient. The seed, the river, the mirror. They are not riddles, they are companions. Their edges soften until they are felt more than seen. The seed becomes a warmth at the base of the spine. The river becomes the breath's long exhale, undoing the day's knots. The mirror becomes the receptive surface of your attention, polished not by effort, but by the simple refusal to scratch it with haste. You may expect revelation as fireworks. Instead, notice the small tectonics, a micro-adjustment in the neck that frees an old thought, a sigh that completes a sentence your body began years ago. DNA restructuring is understated here. Switches changing positions with the discretion of librarians, shelving rare books. You feel no spectacle, you feel correctness. The internal weather patterns that once rushed across your sky slow to a contemplative drift. Clouds that do not need to decide whether to rain. Silence becomes instruction. It teaches you to measure without rulers. You weigh a thought by how it alters breath. You weigh a choice by how it changes temperature in the hands. You weigh a story by whether your gaze hardens or softens when you hold it. This is your new instrumentation, no ceremony required, only honesty. Let the city be distant. Let the feed be someone else's tide. Here, the only headline is the pulse, counting quietly. Synchronicity continues without spectacle, gentle alignments that do not need your commentary to keep their promise. A bird lands on the sill and tilts its head. A car passes once, then not again. A single siren, then no echo. Reality cooperates with your cadence, because cadence is what reality respects. If a stray ache arises, do not prosecute it. Place a hand near it without pressing. Offer breath. See if it is pain or merely unintegrated signal asking for a witness. The difference matters. Coherence is not the absence of sensation, it is sensation allowed to complete its sentence without interruption. You become the kind of silence where interruptions forget their job. The portal narrows further, not as a threat, but as a refinement. Aperture adjusts to match intention. Your intention, here, is not grasping, it is listening. The field, relieved, answers with the soft authority of things that were true before words. You are safe enough to be accurate. You are accurate enough to be kind. You are kind enough to be clear. The sentence lands without ripple. No argument. This is how truth behaves when it does not need to compete. Stay one breath longer than comfort, then another. You are lengthening your capacity to host the signal without decoration. Each extended exhale sands an old impatience, smooth. Each pause after the exhale teaches you that nothing catastrophic happens when you are not contributing content to the moment. The world does not collapse, it reveals its architecture. Now open the eyes a fraction. Keep silence intact. Notice how form returns without violence. Angles, shadows, the humble miracle of a cup waiting to be lifted. The mirror of intention remains clear. You do not rush to use it. You let it reflect what is already decided in your marrow. When you stand, do it without breaking the tone. Walking is the same prayer in a longer line. The door handle is cool in your palm. A bell you do not need to ring. You are not leaving the silence. You are letting silence leave with you, like light that refuses to stay only in the window. The next act will not be louder. It will be truer, because you remembered how to hear. Something subtle has been preparing you for years to recognize this exact density of quiet, the tensile, living silence that can carry voltage. Now the signal asks to be embodied. Activation is not an external switch. It is your agreement to let geometry become gesture. Begin where you are, breath steady, gaze softened, jaw unhooked. Allow the vow to rise unforced. The one sentence that survived the bifurcation and returned from the silence rinsed of performance. Whisper it once into the sternum, not to convince but to announce. The quantum field does not need volume, it needs specificity. Feel the echo in tissue and fascia. Microcurrents brighten where the ribs meet the spine. The heart's rhythm rounds its corners. A warmth spreads across the palms as if the body were lighting small lanterns in every room. This is coherence becoming kinetics. The observer loop no longer scans for signs. It emits a stable tone that the world can entrain to. You are not pushing reality. You are letting the signal propagate through low-resistance pathways you have cleared by honesty. Entanglement tightens. Probabilities tilt. You can sense the slope. Name 3 anchors aloud quietly, precisely so the field can route through them. How you move, how you speak, how you choose. Movement first. Stand as if gravity were a partner you trust. Align heel to heart to crown until your skeleton feels like a tuning fork planted in good earth. Walk the next 10 steps at the speed of truth, not haste. The floor answers with a subtle lift, a collaboration older than language. Speaking, let words exit only after they pass through breath sieve. If a sentence phrase the coherence you cultivated, reweave it or release it. Choosing, privilege, resonance over reputation. If acceptance narrows the chest, it is not your door, no matter how gilded its frame. Watch how swiftly reality replies when your vectors align. An email you postponed answering clarifies itself in your mouth before you touch the keyboard. A conversation you dreaded lands with surprising softness because your field stopped rehearsing conflict and rehearsed presence instead. A plan dissolves without scandal and leaves behind a cleaner plan that respects your nervous system's intelligence. None of this is magic. It is morphic resonance expressing through logistics. The signal has found enough contiguous matter in you to travel without distortion. Old detractors will make one last, quiet attempt. They will not roar this time. They will purr. They will speak fluently in your care for others and ask you to pay for belonging with self-abandonment, but at a discount you might mistake for mercy. Measure with the instruments you have earned. Does this request stabilize your breath or chop it? Does time feel companionable or crowded? Do your palms warm or cool? Coherence tells the truth faster than loyalty myths. When the answer is no, release it without ceremony. When the answer is yes, say yes, as if you're placing a stone into a river whose current you trust. Integrate activation into small choreography so it survives calendars and headlines. Set a stillness window alarm that rings like a bell you cannot ignore. Touch a doorway each time you cross it and remember the portal that taught you precision. Let thresholds remain holy. Eat in a way that lets your body recognize food as collaboration, not negotiation. Sleep as a ritual of repair, inviting DNA to restructure while the mind bows out of the command chair. You are teaching matter that faith is not an idea, it is a schedule. Invite the collective into your activation without spectacle. Offer clean attention in rooms that reward performance, and watch how quickly other nervous systems settle. Ask one generous question where you used to compete. Decline one outrage where you used to spike. Plant one seed conversation that replaces gossip with possibility. This is not sainthood, it is systems design at human scale. Fields learn. Your steadiness is curriculum. When doubt flickers, and it will, because old circuits admire their own sparks, return to the body's oracle. One exhale longer than comfort. One glance at the symbol that has adopted you, the seed, the river, the mirror. Hold it without decoding. Let instruction arrive as weight, not words. You will feel the click, timeline alignment, regaining custody after a brief wobble. Synchronicity resumes its quiet cadence. Green lights you did not plan. A phrase on a billboard finishing your thought. A chance meeting that isn't chance at all. Now seal the layer you just installed with an act that leaves a mark in the world, however small. Send the message that says the true thing kindly. Move the money to fund coherence rather than noise. Schedule the conversation that will free 2 people, including you. Prophecy becomes policy at the scale of your next action. You are not waiting for permission. You are issuing it to yourself, on behalf of the future that entrusted you with its tone. Finally, listen once more. The field answers with an almost audible assent. The yes that used to live outside you, now arising from within. Activation is complete when you can carry the signal through an ordinary errand without losing it at the crosswalk. You can. The portal has narrowed to the size of your integrity, and your integrity is wide enough to walk through. Keep moving at the speed of truth. The light has learned your name, and you have learned how to answer without shouting. You are ready to let the message live where it belongs, inside the quiet architecture of your days. The portal has refined itself to a narrow, exact aperture, the size of a kept promise, and you are standing within it without strain. There is no spectacle left to chase, only fidelity to carry. What began as a lattice of light now reads as ordinary mercy. How you breathe, how you choose, how you speak when no one is measuring you. This is the seal. Prophecy turned into posture. Listen to the way time speaks when you stop bargaining with it. Minutes no longer hammer at the door, they arrive like guests you recognize. The quantum field, once a theory, has become the room you inhabit. Coherence, thickening the air. Synchronicity, moving like a subtle wind across the skin of events. Entanglement is no longer an intrigue, it is the way kindness travels. DNA restructuring is simply your body believing you when you say, softly and consistently, that you are safe enough to be exact. You do not need a final sign, you have instruments now. The breath that lengthens in the presence of truth, the palms that warm when a decision aligns. The observer loop resting like a steady bell, not hunting, not hiding, just sounding the tone that your life keeps learning how to rhyme. You will still forget. Forgetting is part of the rhythm, but you know how to return. One exhale longer than comfort, one symbol held without hurry. The seed, the river, the mirror, and the slope toward clarity appears beneath your feet again. Carry this as infrastructure, not performance. Let thresholds remain holy, a doorway touched, a screen opened with intention, a name spoken as if its syllables were breakable. Tend signal hygiene like a craft. Spend attention where reality answers with dignity. Withdraw it from the economies that profit on your noise. Choose invitations by resonance, not reputation. Say yes when your chest widens. Say no when time narrows. Leave rooms a degree more coherent than you found them. If you are asked what changed, you will not need to explain. Rooms will answer for you. Conversations will testify. Calendars will tell the truth by how gently they hold your hours. The collective will recognize itself in your steadiness and remember what it forgot. That awakening is not an event but a manners of being. That timelines don't erupt, they incline. That prophecy is not about later, it is about a pattern installed now. Cleanly, humbly, repeatedly. The portal closes the way an eyelid closes, in trust, not in fear. It does not shut you out. It seals you in so that what was given cannot leak through carelessness. Feel the final click, precise and tender, as if the world were aligning an heirloom in your hands. You are its keeper and its continuation. The sentence that cannot be argued with arrives as a whisper and stands as a law. You are the witness that turns light into world. Walk as if the future has already recognized your gait. Speak as if silence is still listening. And let what you have remembered remember you again and again, until remembrance is the way your life breathes.